Probably gonna go back.
There we go. Okay.
Right on. All right,
Okay.
thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
What's that?
You're good. We'll call to order this meeting of the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board, October 1st, 2024. Can we have an approval of tonight's agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion's made by Mr. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Bossy to approve tonight's agenda. All in favor, Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Bossy?
Aye.
Mr. Grace? All right. Mr. Sherlin?
Aye.
Mr. DeCosta?
Aye.
Mr. Franzuto?
Aye.
Did we have minutes sent out?
No, I didn't get
Okay.
them yet.
Just a, notice to everybody, the select board will have a public hearing proposing, an amendment to shellfish regulations to allow the lowering or raising of commercial-based bushel limit. The earliest that can be is October 16th. Please, keep your eye on notices, and we'll update as, time goes on. We will have our next meetings the 15th, so. Any department report? Anything emailed?
He's not present.
Natural resources, Sarah Riley, please.
Thank you. I'm gonna keep it short so that Vince has plenty of time for his presentation. Real quick, just a hatchery wrap up. We're finishing up our season. We finished doing our 55 dives through Nantucket Harbor, Connecticut Harbor and Tuckernuck. And we are in the process of compiling the numbers, but we have a pretty good idea of what's going on in Nantucket Harbor. This was the first year that we did Connecticut Harbor and Tuckernuck Harbor and established a baseline and site between the two areas. Commercial or recreational scalloping starts tomorrow. And we also just dove on our last release that we did in Connecticut, and we're running through those numbers. Looked like we had some good recruitment from that towards the middle of Connecticut. And what else are we doing? We are, so like Andy said, we're going to be going to the board on the 16th. The last advertisement is the week of the 10th. To see if they will agree to adjusting the regulations for being able to go up or down on the commercial base scallop limit based on what the survey results provide. I think this year it would be a reasonable request to go up based on what we had last year and what we're seeing this year. But that's something that we can put on the agenda for discussion, or we can discuss further about that. And we have about 300,000 cohogs that need to go out into some recreational areas. We're going to hold some in some trays with predator netting. We have some sand trays that we're going to drop down the bottom for the winter to try to get them a little bit bigger before planting a portion of them out. On October 7th, we'll be going out with Boston University to plant the eelgrass seeds that the Land Council collected this summer and that are still in our tanks down at Brent Point. Those will be going on Hussey Shoal. And I think that's kind of all I have for right now. Do you have any questions about the end of season wrap up for us?
Questions, comments from the board? Well,
Couple comments. I think that either our next meeting or our first meeting in November. I want to make sure we have it on the agenda, probably for both, to discuss the possibility of raising the 6 boxes. For me personally, it's a lot about what the yield is. It's not about what the quantity is. If we're looking at another year where we're looking at 6.5 pounds a box, then I would personally be in favor of raising to 6 boxes. If we're looking at a year where we're getting 7 to 8 or more out of the box, then we don't necessarily need to raise it. It's more about getting the weight back to where it always used to be for a fisherman, which was like 35 to 40 pounds. If it's a 6 pound a limit box and you're not getting in there, and the last couple of years, my experience, and Jimmy can speak on this, but the trend has been that the scallops are worth the most in November, December. And then the market drops out and the opposite. We used to get the lowest prices in November, December, and the highest prices after that. So if the scallop's gonna be worth the most in November, December, and the weight is off, I think we should really consider going to an extra box to give the fishermen the ability to get enough catch to fill the demand, because last year, like from Thanksgiving to Christmas, I on numerous days went into the fish market and saw the fish markets literally telling people they couldn't buy more than 2 pounds of scallops a day because they didn't have the product. Which is crazy, because then right after January, we couldn't get rid of it. So I would rather harvest them in the months when they're worth money. And then after the first of the year, go back to, maybe we retroactively go back to 5 boxes on January 1. But I'd like to keep us on our agenda to discuss it.
Consider it done, Bob, we'll have that on the agenda. Do we know?
Discussed how that was gonna be announced or how that's gonna be?
I mean, I imagine that
That's it.
it's a public hearing at the select board meeting, so they'll say yay or nay, which I'm sure they'll say yay for being able to adjust up or down, and then the question will be, what should it be this year? And I think that it should be driven by the people that are involved in the fishery, as far as like, I don't think natural resources will ever come in and say, okay, there's enough scallops, so I think that you guys should have 10 bushels. I think you guys need to advocate for what you want, and then we'll support it or not,
It'll come to
Because-
Shad for the decision on,
right?
okay.
Well, that's why I
Let me
say
make sure I
that,
do.
we can start talking about it at the next meeting, which is in 2 weeks, and either we make a recommendation then, or we make it the first Tuesday in November, but it gives us time to see what the yield is based on the push rake season and the divers, and, it gives us a good idea. So, I just want to keep it on our radar. The other thing I just wanted to put out there, and this is more of a personal thing than anything else, that anybody gets any green crabs between now and March 1st, I will take all you get to the point where I can't fill my trap anymore, because I use them for bait. And right now I'm paying an exorbitant amount of money to go to the Cape and get green crabs. And I know that they're a predator here, so I'll be more than happy to take them off your hands. I have a pen and I'll put them in the pen, and they'll happily live all winter until I can use them for bait. So
Thanks, Bob.
I'll take them. You got them, I'll take them.
I will say that we didn't see a lot of green crabs in any of our surveys except for the horse shed.
What's interesting is my friends on the Cape go into the ponds where there's nothing, like up in the creek and stuff, and they'll set a cage in the mud in there with like a couple of menhaden in it. And they'll haul it the next morning, and that thing can't get another green crab in there. So I wonder if they go into these ponds and hibernate in mud, and then they come out into the eelgrass. Cause I've set traps and I don't get any, really. I get a few in the dredges, but not like what they get, but yeah, anyway. If somebody's got green crabs and they wanna get rid of them, I'll take them. Don't crush them.
What are you using them for?
Bait for, to tog. And sea bass, and actually stripers eat them.
You can actually,
They will live in a pen all winter. Pete.
no, I mean, you can actually. The crab will hold together while you're casting a line.
You put a crab on a jig, drop it to the bottom, and they eat
I
it.
see.
Especially the small ones. If they're real big, we'll cut them in half. Yeah. But yeah,
Can we get moving here?
sorry, Dave.
Nothing?
Go ahead, Dave.
No, I'm good.
Moving on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tara, just one question, I guess, do we know, is there any projection of, how many commercial scallopers will be active?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We usually, the past couple of years, have been selling 100 licenses, so it just kind of depends.
And aside from the yield, Bob, which I agree with, completely, and another factor not mentioned is how many guys are gonna be fishing, and the fewer that are fishing, it seems like, the more, the more reason for the limit to be raised. Any more discussion on natural resources report?
Yeah, just one question. I know it's really soon, you just got done with your surveys, but do you have a general sense of what you saw out there?
Yeah, I mean,
Based on looking at last year with all the seeds shifting around and.
yes, there was like an overall uptick in all of our survey sites from the seed movement as far as adults go. And I think if you're scalloping and you're thinking about where all the seed was last year, that's where our most adults, adult density is this year. In addition to everything that we move being in all the other places that we don't usually have a lot of adults.
So it looks like the seed movement worked.
The seed movement worked and there's plenty of adults where the seed was too.
All right.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Comments or questions from the public on natural resources report?
Great bunch of lads.
Strictly on the natural resources report.
Yes. Great talk, I really I listened to your report, thank you very much. But I didn't hear of any concern about, when you mentioned the opening day for scalloping tomorrow, any concern about the possible contamination of our Mattocket Harbor scallop beds from the fiberglass debris from the turbine blade. We know large sections of that turbine blade still remain on the seabed floor. And they say they're gonna stay there until they retrieve them at the end of October. I walk out at Smith Point to the point every other day, every couple of days. And at the point, at the 28th of September, this is what I picked up. And I don't pick up all of it because I don't generally have, not able to carry it all back. Today, at the point, this was every day more blade debris is washing up. This blade crisis is not over. Yet we're not hearing anything from the departments that we look for direction on these matters, whether the scallops are safe, whether they're not safe. And I wrote to Emma Morgan, water quality specialist, and she said water sampling has been collected since the blade event, July 13th, over 2.5 months ago. Yet they're sorting them, they're counting them, they're processing them. There's no results on the data. We have no results on any impact. And obviously there's a risk there, or the department wouldn't be taking water quality sampling every week since the blade event and every other week. So there was an article at the Nantucket Today magazine last night, and it was about the shellfish beds in Nantucket. And it talked about the water coming in at the tide cycles, creating eddies. And then that creates tidal basins where the scallops settle. Well, we know water's coming in around there too from the debris field. What else is settling in those tidal basins with the scallops? I also have a couple of articles on the danger of microplastic. If the protection of, I also want to mention the, at that point where it's roped off for the protection of the habitat of the piping plover, it looks like a garbage dump. It is full of this. So that's a violation of the endangered species, because that requires that we protect their habitat as well as the endangered animal. But if that's not your thing, I just wanna,
Mary,
two articles.
Excuse me, Mary, we're gonna have a lot more discussion on this when it's on the agenda.
Could I just
I'd
give
like
you two
Tara to
articles?
be able to reply to your water quality testing question, Mr.
Okay.
Anderson.
I'll be just gonna tell you, bag number, this bag is not Vineyard Winds. That bag is Vineyard Winds. That's just general
Well,
styrofoam. It's-
Vineyard Winds is white styrofoam and green styrofoam.
Alright.
Both white and green. I just want to, in case I have, it's not, I'm not here when this comes up again, because I'm limited. I just want to give these two articles. On the danger of bisphenol and wind turbines damages human fertility.
Thank you.
Microplastics our risk to, cardiovascular health.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Tara, anything on the
Um,
water quality testing?
Yes, thank you, Mary. We are concerned about it. I'll just update you on the testing that we did start testing weekly, and when September started, it became bi-monthly, so we're testing twice a month. We do have those samples currently in our possession. We are waiting for UMass because there's only one machine that can analyze what these plastics are and ID them. And you have to reserve time on them, on these machines. And so, of course, this was an unexpected event, so we have to get in the queue. And so we're waiting to get in the queue for someone to run the samples to go through them. And as soon as we are able to do that, we will get the information out. Vineyard Wind is in the same situation. They are testing also. And they contacted UMass to use this machine, and UMass said no, because there's no space, because they're doing ours. So as soon as we get those results, you know, that will be public knowledge, and we will get that out as soon as possible. As far as shellfish safety goes, I think, the current research and what I personally believe is that shellfish are excellent at accepting and rejecting particles that are food and rejecting stuff that is not food. They eat diatoms, they have, you know, funky shapes and all kinds of stuff like that. We don't eat the bay scallop digestive system, it's the muscle. So I am, and they're a very short-lived animal, so I'm pretty confident in saying that bay scallops are completely safe for the consumer based and in light of this event as well. And I'm happy to read your articles and have a conversation about it also. It's just, I don't, you know, we're in the meeting, it isn't like the best place to have a back and forth in detail about that, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you later on. Mhm.
Tara, is there a method where you could do a study in the lab with, say, oysters and quahogs, where we do eat the gut and add some of these materials?
I
And
mean,
it's all
somebody
little
could do that.
separate
That's
thing.
not what we do. We're not set up for that type of research and analysis, but certainly, you know, a university that engages in that could do that.
So my microplastic researchers showed me that each type of shellfish is different,
Yeah,
and no one lab can handle all shellfish. So UMass may handle one type, you may have to reach out to a half dozen or more other types of labs to actually get all the approved lab data.
thanks, Scott. That's anybody else? We're gonna move forward to old business. Discussion on Sean Fitzgibbon's oyster lease. And anything on aquaculture leases in general. Sean's not here tonight. I believe Sean has quite a bit of information to put together. Before he comes before us again. If there's anything else. Board has any questions or comments they'd like to forward to Sean? Anything else on oyster farming in general? If not, we'll move forward. Continued review and update of shellfish regulations. Nothing?
I don't have anything additional to add to what we're doing, except that we're gonna continue to push through the changes that we made. There are still a few things to add to a later agenda, as far as like some discussions needed to further along stuff like, compensation and items like that, but those things are gonna take time.
Thank you. Jim, you didn't make it to the last meeting. You had,
Should I like me to read the proposal I written up for that, for the
have it?
conversation? Yeah, I have it, think of the text message, just sure I can read it. I did. I think, this is up for adjusting, and need to have a discussion of when this compensation is awarded to the fishermen or whoever is involved. So anyway, my coupon proposal, one coupon for each hour worked if other funding is not available. The rate should be set at $100 per hour for boat fishermen using base gulp equipment. The rate can be afforded to two fishermen per boat when working together. The coupons will be similar to those that are used on, like, for example, lobster traps. Or once the tag is in place, they cannot be removed without cutting them off. Alleviating using them twice. The extra box must be tagged previously to landing, the catch, and the tag must be removed from the box when dumped for shucking. The empty box of the tag attempting to use more than once will be considered a violation and loss of fishing day. If the same violation occurs again, loss of license will occur. Tags will be valid for 1 year from issuance. And they'll also be numbered. I should have brought a tag on my truck, but that's my proposal for that. Probably might have some insight.
Well,
The only thing I would add to that is, it said use of scallop equipment. Where if like Dan shows up with his big boat, or you show up with your big boat, or I show up with my big boat. Or somebody brings one of the oyster boats, if you have a commercial license and you're using equipment, whether it's a boat or whatever, like we use the big boats to move large amounts of seed, so I like to have somehow add that in, to not just say a scallop boat or scallop
Yeah,
equipment.
I agree.
makes sense, for sure.
This isn't something we're trying to hash out tonight, the final
No.
version, this is just.
No,
this is discussion.
Yeah, right, okay.
This is-
Okay.
I wanted Jim to
Good
verbalize it
valid points, yeah.
so that Tara could get notes, so she's up to speed with what Jim had on his mind.
You know,
Was there something else you wanted to mention on broken boxes and
I think
did we
I think
go over
covered
that
last time.
enough? All right,
I think that's.
Mr.
gonna be
Chairman?
Dave,
Yeah, could, Jim, could you send that out in an email, what you want to try to do?
Yes.
Thanks.
thank you. Okay. Anything else on shellfish regulation updates? Okay, we're gonna move into Vineyard Wind discussion. This has been on our agenda now. This is the third meeting. Mr. Brace and I discussed this a little bit ahead of time and thought, it's time that the board, especially since we have a full quorum, to make a decision, possibly tonight, whether we are going to, send a recommendation to the select board. And, I just assume this doesn't drag out. That our discussion on this topic tonight will be conducted civilly and all discussion through the chair, please. So there has been discussion out there and, possibly some, support, being given towards the select board to, back out of the good neighbor agreement. Personally, I'd like to hear from the board, and, you know, our decisions are based on how we feel the effects of the health of our harbors are from this, how we feel about offshore wind development in general, versus oil use or oil spills. None of that matters as far as I'm concerned. The discussion tonight is about Vineyard Wind and its possible effects or negative effects on our harbors or within water within 3 miles of the island if we really want to stretch it. So, anybody have anything they'd like to add?
I'll tell you my position.
Dave, Mr. Bossy, please.
I think there are powers way above us that have the power to make actual decisions, the people that we simply make recommendations to that are working this far harder than we can. And are in deeper into this than we can. I'm not sure this is something that us sending a recommendation to the select board is going to affect the select board's work in iota. If anything, I fear that it'll be perceived as piling on and make our other recommendations to the select board, where we actually may have some valid input to them, carry less weight. So this is not something I would vote to, that we should be making any recommendation to the select board.
Okay.
I got something to say to that.
Mr. Brace.
I hear what you're saying, Dave. but they may look to us, they may come to us and say, what do you think? You've got fishermen that go out there and fish, and you've got, you know, some remaining debris washing up, and yes, you know, the wind turbines are out of the jurisdiction of the state and the town, but still we should at least write something. We don't necessarily have to send it. It's whatever the board wants to do, but you know, we should have something prepared. This is what we think. We think this. And if it's not appropriate to send it, we don't send it, but it should at least be on the record. And if it's one little speck on the huge spectrum of things that, you know, all the powers that be, and so be it. But, you know, at least we said, we feel this way and we advised you. And
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Peter. Mr. Franzino?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Dave Bossy said. However, I think we should send a letter of support to the selectmen. I think we should remind them who we represent, including the fishermen, and the fact that this has been discussed at this board numerous times. I agree with Dave. I don't think this is something that we need to advise them on. I just think they need to know that we are paying attention, we support them, and remind them who we represent.
Thank you, Dave.
Would you be willing to
Hey
take a
guys,
stab?
I'm happy to comment next if no one else does.
Let me get through the board first, if there's anybody else, Mr.
Sorry to
DeCosta,
interrupt.
Mr. Sharon, Mr. Anderson.
I'm gonna reserve my comments to the end. That's all right with you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sharon, anything at this point?
I would have a question to the fishermen. Have you received any money that was the annual distribution?
No, not, we don't get
Nobody's
money.
gonna get anything.
Okay, no, I just wanted to make sure.
All right,
They're not giving us money on this project. Period.
all right, in part, I will agree with Mr. Bossy. But here again, who those higher ups may be, as far as in our little island here, we haven't had a say. Nobody had a say. This decision was made in executive session, as far as I know. The higher up in my mind would be Planning and Economic Development Commission, that did not have this on their agenda at all or ever. So where our issue would not be economic development, but our issue is certainly health of the harbor. And I would like to think that the select board would take a notice or a recommendation or simply a letter of support that, and not let it affect anything else. And that would be the professional way to determine what our letter would be about. So I would like to think it would not have negative effects on any future recommendations. So let's hope not, if we go through with this.
Go ahead, take comment from the public and then I want to hear what they all have to say.
Hospital, that would be Jesse Sandoli.
Hey guys, yeah, Jesse Sandoli from 167 Seafood and Keep Nantucket Wild. It's a new 501c3 on the island, and it's going to be dedicated to stopping the industrializations of our oceans that's happening just off our coast by foreign oil and gas companies. Some of this stuff is, 30,000 foot view kind of thing, but I'll try to keep it mainly to what relates to you guys in the Shellfish Advisory Board. But, our first initiative is a petition that's well underway to the select board to withdraw from the Good Neighbor Agreement and request a moratorium on all future wind projects. We have a huge amount of support. We have over 80 island businesses so far and over 1,100 signatures, and this has just been in the past 7 days. We feel strongly that the Good Neighbor Agreement is terrible for Nantucket. What's happening at a state and federal level is everyone's pointing to it and saying, look, Nantucket signed, they'll support this project at every level of government. And as you just pointed out, this was signed behind closed doors, doesn't represent the people of Nantucket or the businesses that power our, hugely tourism-driven economy. And we believe if we stay in this agreement, we'll face huge economic consequences. SHAB, I couldn't think of a more important Nantucket organization as it relates to health of our oceans, harbors, our food chain. And in addition to just our harbors, these offshore wind companies are pile driving these skyscraper-sized towers into our offshore scallop beds. No one's really talking about the offshore scallop beds, but there's going to be huge impact there. And on the final environmental impact statement, BOEM disclosed that there's going to be 105,390 acres of ocean floor that will be disrupted through the plow driving to get all that electric cabling underneath the ocean there. And with respect to the blade break, we just don't feel like this is going to be a one-time incident. These things are breaking all over the world. We just had one break in the Midwest. We had another one fall into the ocean in England just a few weeks ago. And these are all the same exact blades that are being used by Vineyard Wind. And what we're really talking about is mass industrialization of our oceans. The collective size of these lease areas is bigger than the state of Rhode Island. It's also worth noting that this is totally an experiment. What we're witnessing, we're ground zero for this in the U.S. Any project this size, we're seeing it for the first time. I don't know if any of you guys have been out there, but what's happening out there is a city in the middle of the ocean. And regardless of the blade breaks, it's going to continue to pollute our harbors, just the amount of activity out there. When we were there, we saw 5 massive ships, some of them from the Gulf of Mexico that are clearly related to oil rigs. 2 of them had helipads on them. And then we saw, another half dozen fast ferry sized support vessels performing smaller jobs. And I mean, there's just no way that having that much activity out there isn't going to result in the pollution of our harbors. It's just right there. It's so close. There'll be never ending maintenance and fuel burn associated with it. And just to hit on kind of, like I said, a 30,000 foot viewpoint, BOEM clearly stated in the final environmental impact statement, overall, and this is a quote, overall, it is anticipated that there would be no collective impact on global warming as a result of offshore wind. And I know you guys aren't talking about global warming at this meeting, but I just think it's really important to note. It's just so obvious that this is a massive financial play by these foreign energy giants, and they're taking advantage of federal tax incentives that we're all paying for. So I think the future of our island is really at stake here. And I think you guys are in a great position to advise the board that we need to get out of this agreement for all of our benefit. And with Keep Nantucket Wild, this new 501(c), we'd love to help you guys in any way that we can and do what's best for Nantucket.
Thank you, Jesse.
My pleasure.
Would you be willing to take a staff comment?
Please do. Vince?
So,
Who are you?
Yes, I'm Vince Murphy. I'm the Sustainability Programs Manager for the town within the Natural Resources Department. I'm here to talk on a different topic that's on after this, but there's crossover, as there is with lots of different projects. This is a different part of something that I work on, not directly, indirectly, has to be said. So, with regard to the Good Neighbor Agreement and how this is being framed, we just have to look at how it came to be in the first place. The Good Neighbor Agreement came into being for 2 reasons. First, a small portion of a cable that brings electricity to Cape Cod goes through county waters. Second is because of the historic status of Nantucket. They're the 2 reasons that we managed to get the Good Neighbor Agreement in the first place. I'm not going to talk about the Equality Agreement. I'm just going to talk about the origin and now what it does. If they had moved that cable out of the 3 miles and onto the other side of Muskega Channel, they wouldn't have to pay the Nantucket anything. That's just obvious. So it is within county waters. That's why we're entitled to negotiate with them. That's how the Good Neighbor Agreement got going in the first place. So that's there. And whether you agree or disagree with the quality of the agreement, that's its own thing. But what the agreement does is give the town leverage. So that we can have some say in it. If there's a recommendation to withdraw from the Good Neighbor Agreement, you end up giving up all your leverage. But if you were to write a letter to the select board for the sake of argument, saying to work within the bounds of the Good Neighbor Agreement and the bounds of the law, to be able to use the leverage that's in the Good Neighbor Agreement to get maximum benefit for the island, that would be a better content for your letter.
Okay, so am I mistaken, Vince, that it wasn't part of the Good Neighbor Agreement that the town is not supposed to speak negatively
That is
towards the
correct.
project?
That is
That is-
correct.
I didn't speak negatively, I'm just
You have to-
offering you an idea.
No,
Part of the Good
you're
Neighbor
saying
Agreement is
that
you have to support the project.
you're saying that staying within the Good Neighbor Agreement is giving us more leverage.
Mhm.
How do we have more leverage if we can't speak negatively?
That's up to this committee to decide for itself, but I'm just saying that will be a useful thing to bring towards the select board from this committee, as I see it, within the bounds of the committee's work within the harbours. So to say, look, for harbour water quality, we think that you should use the Good Neighbor Agreement for X, Y, or Z to try and get leverage.
Can you elaborate on X, Y, and Z?
It's been a couple of weeks since I read all the Good Neighbor Agreement again, but it would get you, so there's the funding sources that are in it. Maybe we look at how we redefine the funding sources, how they're used, and then, well, can that be used for harbour benefit? That kind of thing.
Okay. Versus if the project were not there at all, this is not a retribution we would need to be looking for. I mean, this was mentioned at a previous meeting that if this installation was not there, we wouldn't be discussing negative effects.
The installation is in the cable, or the installation is in the wind farm turbines?
I think they go together. We don't need the cable without the turbines. And if the turbine is our only very small link to this, I mean, if the cables is our only small link to this, then, that's maybe something, I mean, we're just fortunate that that cable is there, I guess, to be able to have a voice, through the Good Neighbor Agreement, but the way I'm interpreting this, if the Good Neighbor Agreement wasn't there at all, then we could be saying whatever we please. Now, if it falls on deaf ears, so be it, but at least we would be a voice that is instrumental in raising other voices in other communities. I think other communities are looking for people in close proximity, like Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, for their to take the lead in voicing opinion.
Is that not the role of the select board rather than this committee?
Well, as you know, we're an advisory board, so simply, this board would simply, if it agreed to, by a majority vote, to send a recommendation to the select board. That I believe within the job of the select board, at least on this decision, would have been a better decision to have it open to the public. And honestly, the question of whether signing the Good Neighbor Agreement to begin with or not, probably, in my opinion, should have been a non-binding question on the ballot to feel out the temperature of the voting public. I don't believe an executive session decision on something that could possibly be affecting the entire island was the right decision.
That's not something I can talk about. I don't know. I wasn't there either.
Right.
But yeah, I'm just trying to give you an idea of how to gain leverage.
Okay.
If I could just
Thanks.
add to that really quickly, guys. you know, we have an incredible amount of leverage as it pertains to exiting the Good Neighbor Agreement. We have the opportunity to reframe the entire picture and send a message to state and federal government that Nantucket isn't going to stand for these projects. As you said, we wouldn't be having this conversation if the turbines weren't there in the first place. These are terrible for Nantucket. I haven't talked to a single person that thinks these are a good idea. Like I said, we have the support of over 80 businesses within the 6 days that this petition has been launched. This is just the beginning. As I said, the lease area is going to be the state of Rhode Island. We're talking about massive, massive industrialization of our oceans for as far as we can see. This first blade break is not even the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to be looking at. So I couldn't encourage you more to assert yourselves with the select board and recommend to them that we get out of this agreement and send a message to both state and federal government that Nantucket is not going to stand for any more of these projects that are terrible for our environment.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mary.
Yeah, so I was talking about the Blade event that happened in July 13th, but now I want to like turn forward. The Good Neighbor Agreement encompasses the additional 3 or 4 projects of Vineyard Wind that are in the pipeline. So that's hundreds and hundreds more turbines in the lease area. Also, money is not going to solve this problem. It's not going to protect us from the environmental damage from this. No amount of money is, whether they, turn in unison and they turn the lights off at night. That is not going to protect us. The only thing that is going to protect us is stopping this project now and decommissioning those blades, because we have 71 ticking time bombs out there. They were made on the cheap. They didn't use the carbon fiber. To test them, they took 50 feet off the end of the blade to fit them into the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center on Boston Harbor and tested them that way. That's crazy. So we have untested, uninspected 71 ticking time bombs out there. And even if they were wonderful turbine blades, the bigger picture disaster with these plastics out there is something called leading edge erosion. And everybody with an engine prop knows what I'm talking about. That leading edge of the blade comes in contact with dust, wind, rain, snow, and it sheds the microplastics continuously into the ocean. And that's when, if everything works out there. So having how many 1,400 turbines out there, three blades each of 350 feet at least long. This is Silent Spring 2.0 and getting right into our food chain. And so, yes, the public looks to direction to this department, this advisory board looks to you for direction in these matters. And at this point, it's just so obvious. This was a test. It's obvious they failed the test. At this point, if we're not all speaking loudly to stop and take them down, we are supporting more of the same. We're supporting the damage to human health of not only Nantucket, the whole ocean of southern New England. So I plead to this board to please send a strong message to get out of that Good Neighbor Agreement so that we can protect ourselves, because we cannot rely on GE Vernova or Arcadis to protect us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
One other just quick stat that I forgot to mention, guys, with respect to potential future pollution of the harbors. There's 34 million gallons total across this future project, 34 million gallons of oils, lubricants, and coolants that'll be stored within these turbines. We haven't seen anything spill yet, but just the risk of having that many gallons of fuels, coolants, and oils in these turbines offshore. I mean, what's going to happen when the first real deal hurricane comes through, or what's going to happen this winter when the first serious nor'easter blows through and one of these things goes down? And the next thing we know, we're not just dealing with small particles in the harbor, we're dealing with oils and coolants and things that are going to get directly into our food chain. Just another great stat on that final environmental impact statement for you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandoli. Board members? Anybody else from the public like to speak?
Seeing nobody else is left, I guess I'll make my comments then.
Mr. DeCosta.
So. Bear with me, Mr. Chairman. This good name agreement was signed by the select board in 2020, I believe, during the height of COVID. There was never any public meetings. Very few people knew about it. And the main reason that it was done, as Mr. Murphy said, was because they wanted to go through town waters. Well, they wanted to go through town waters because they could plow through 20 feet of sand much easier than they could plow through 80 feet of rock in the middle of Muskegon Channel. I'm very disappointed that we signed this agreement, but I understand why the board did at the time. I'm also very disappointed with Mariah Mitchell because they took the money. And they haven't even said a word about any of this. I haven't heard a word from Mariah Mitchell once saying we condone this, we don't condone it, but they took the money. If anything, they should give the goddamn money back. And so should the town. And we should start from scratch. These 68 turbines are in, they're going in, they're not going away. The cable runs through our waters. I was very involved on the opposing side of SBPF doing, at the time they wanted to mine sand offshore and pump it onto the beach at Sankey. And we agreed with them to have 2-for-1 mitigation. So for every 1 foot of bottom that they would destroy, the Benthic community destroyed by piling sand on top of it, they were going to give us 2 foot of mitigation. There was no mitigation for this plowing. When that plow went through that bottom off Muskegon Channel, it killed the Benthic community in that area. It will take years for that to come back. That bottom is basically sterile now. We already have a governor who signed on for Vineyard Wind 2. Vineyard Wind 2's cable plans to go through the shoals east of Nantucket and around the island up into Boston. That was the last plan I saw. Now, maybe that's changed, but the first plan that I saw showed Vineyard Wind 2's cable going through the shoals. These are the shoals that protect us from easterlies and winter storms. Now, you start plowing through these shoals, and what's it going to do to our storm surge on the east side of the island? Is it going to breach the end of the harbor? Is it going to cause Great Point to become an island? We don't know that. There's been no studies done on any of this because it's in federal waters and we don't have any say in it. I can't just sit here, I can't sit here and worry about pissing the Board of Selectmen off because we make a comment about something that they've done in executive session. If they won't even release the minutes. Jason's been trying to get the minutes from the first meeting from what, 2 years ago? He's at the state right now trying to get them. What are they hiding behind? Follow the money on this program. Look at the different organizations that have taken money from Vineyard Wind. Save Our Sound, the people that fought adamantly to keep wind turbines out of the sound, they took money from them. Autobahn's taking money from them. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Greenpeace.
At some point, we need to say enough is enough. Now, if I had a magic ball, I would go back to the Board of Selectmen and I would say, okay, we took the 12 million or whatever it was we got. Here, take it back. We'll see you in court. Because this is going to be a nightmare for us. Do you know that the federal government waived the removal fee, the removal requirement to have money put aside in an escrow account to remove these? What happens in 15 to 20 years when these things are obsolete? Are we just going to watch them fall into the ocean? I mean, there's so many problems with this. And it doesn't even matter about, whether you agree or disagree that these things are good for the environment. There's a 10 kW generator on the base of each one of these things. It's the size of this room. It's 70 feet off the water. They had 77-foot waves in the Gulf of Mexico last week with a Category 4 hurricane. What happens when those get washed over by waves if we get a hurricane like that? I mean, and yet we're supposed to just sit here and say nothing. Now, I know we're an advisory board, but I can't just sit here and say we support what the selectmen done because they haven't told us what they've done. All they say is they're renegotiating the good neighbor agreement. Well, the good neighbor agreement specifically states that they're supposed to have lights on the top that go on and off when planes fly by. That hasn't happened. They're taller than they originally said they were gonna be in the good neighbor agreement. So there's a violation. So there's two. And three, they're not painted the color they're supposed to be painted. So they stick out like sore thumbs on a clear day. You know, so we have plenty of options to go after them about violating the good neighbor agreement on their end. And Vineyard Wind is gonna be in a huge lawsuit with GE because those things have been sitting there idle all summer and they haven't made a dime off them. So they're gonna be suing GE for lost revenue. This thing's gonna be in the courts for friggin' years. And meanwhile, we're the ones that stuck holding the bag. Now, whether you agree with green energy or you don't agree with green energy, that's fine. But I would say at the very least, that we should demand that there be some type of escrow account in place to remove these things in the event that they no longer are viable. And two, that we should, you know, the fact that we got this measly $12 million and it covers 4 projects is ridiculous. I mean, it's like, we drank the Kool-Aid too. And I know that at the time, the select board was told, look, you either get on board or you don't get anything. And, Ryan Mitchell started this whole program because they jumped on board and said, we're gonna take the money. But nobody on Nantucket should take the money. Enough is enough. We got plenty of money. We're gonna come to town meeting this year and ask for $200 million to build a new DPW building and a new island home. We're worried about $12 million that we're gonna get over the course of how many years for these windmills to be east of us or south of us? It just boggles my mind that we're at this point. But, you know, going forward, the turbines are in, the cable's in, there's not a whole lot we can do about it. But Vineyard Wind 2, we should have some serious say in what happens there. And whatever other two parts of this 4 lease project, we should really be pushing to say, where's the cable gonna go? Or where are these bases gonna go? I mean, I've been out there all summer fishing next to the thing, so is Jimmy. I've seen nothing but survey boats going back and forth, back and forth, tracking that bottom. They're already planning where they're gonna put the next bases, and this base and that base. They're going right up to the shoals, right up to the southwest edge of the shoals. I mean, right up to them where we fish all spring. You know, we should have some say in this. We're the ones who are gonna have to look at those damn red lights out there for the next 25 years. I mean, there's only a small portion of them now. Wait till they go all the way to the east as far as you can see. I mean, I know we're an advisory board and we can write all the letters we want, and then basically those 5 members of that board are gonna do whatever the hell they want. Cause that's their prerogative, but I hope they're all listening to all this because they all run for reelection. And there's a lot of people that have had enough about this.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a pleasure of the board? Anybody willing to make a motion? Mr. Brace?
Maybe. I don't think we'll be writing a letter between now and the next meeting. I think we just need to all think about it. And come to the next meeting and say the things that we want to put in that letter. I've heard everybody, what they've all said, but, you know, each of us board members should say, we want these things in the letter, and I agree with Bobby, they're not gonna listen to us if they don't want to listen to us, but at least it'll be on record. This is what the Shellfish Board said, this is what the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board said. And this is our position, but just based on what I've heard tonight and what I would watch on the YouTube video, I wouldn't be able to write a letter. Because not everybody spoke, so we should.
No, you certainly need some direction on a letter as secretary.
And I'm talking about everybody writing down and giving me, this is my point, this is what I want to do, whether you are gonna vote for it or not. You know, these are the things that I want our SHAP board to represent to the select board. So that we write, it's clear and concise, this is where we are.
My biggest concern is Vineyard Wind 2.
Yes, okay, so there's one right there, but write them down. So I'm not calling everybody and saying, tell me what, you know, it'd be a lot easier. Then you can hand them to me, read them into the record, you know.
I think.
If
we
it's
all have to-
helpful to you guys, we'd love to send over a list from,
Excuse me, Jesse,
Yeah,
for anybody who's talking tonight, who is a member of the public, could you say, Mr. Chairman? So that you're recognized.
I apologize. Nobody was talking when I spoke up. I apologize.
thank you.
Excuse me, I was looking for the floor. I think we all have to go back and also read the good neighbor agreement to see what's in it, if there's arbitration clauses, mediation clauses, and what that really is. Right now, we're saying it's a good neighbor, but there's a lot of legalese thrown in left and right that may be beneficial to us to also include and how to go about that.
And I thought it was 16 million. And isn't there
I don't
a,
even know.
I thought it was 16 million.
Is it even available to the public?
And isn't there a,
It's gotta be
isn't there a
freedom of information.
Isn't there a fisherman's association out of New Bedford that took the money as well?
Well, there's the Point Judith fleet got paid because they were directly affected by the turbines because they fished in there.
Right.
And there was no money in Vineyard Wind for charter fishing or recreational fishing. There are in some of the other projects to the west, but not in this.
So maybe one of the things that, if we're really, now see, I agree with Bobby, the thing's built. I don't see them coming out. Maybe they're gonna fall down and then they'll come out, but I don't see them coming out. I think the next ones that are gonna happen are the ones you gotta worry about. So then whoever our constituents are that are within our jurisdiction of the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, we ought to know what their impacts are, and maybe
There
that
should be some serious mitigation if we can't stop.
well, we might be asking, for more money to mitigate, I don't know.
You're correct on the 16 million, but Natural Heritage Partners, the attorneys representing us, get 20%. So, Mr. Sandoli, did you have one more?
Yeah, again, I apologize for interrupting. I think we have a little delay on the Zoom here. I was just going to add that we'd be happy to send over a fact sheet of everything that we've pulled from the final environmental impact statements for the project that are put together by BOEM. So these are all just facts from the government. Nothing is based on opinion whatsoever. And then in respect to Cultural Heritage Partners, the firm representing all of us, they're massively conflicted. They're getting paid on a contingency basis for these projects. They have every incentive to convince the select board to continue supporting them. Otherwise, they don't get their money. So massive problem there with Cultural Heritage Partners. But like I said, we'd be happy to send over any list of facts if it's helpful to you guys.
And that probably would be. So, Mr. Brace, if I'll get you Mr. Sandoli's contact information or just simply send him contact for every board member. Is every board member okay with that?
Yeah.
Jim, Bob, Dave, Mr. Franzuto?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to do it.
So I also have to agree with Mr. Brace. We do need time to put together our notes, come back to the next meeting. So if we are going to form a letter, that it be well thought out with proper information before.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Franzuto?
Yeah, it looks like we're headed for some type of a letter to them. And I would add to my list of things that in the future, the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board be included in any type of discussion and negotiation. Again, to remind them who we are representing. We represent the commercial fishermen, the charter fishermen, the recreational fishermen. It's people in Nantucket. So I think it's important that we also be included in any type of further discussion.
Thank you, Dave.
Mr. Chairman, if I can make one last comment.
Bob?
My comments were pretty stern, and I don't want it to come off that I am being combative with the Board of Selectmen. I don't fault the Board of Selectmen for what they did. At the time, they took the best available information that they had. They're not fishermen, they're not watermen. There's there's none really that are representative on that board by, like, when I was on board. I mean, they looked, when I can state for a fact that the 6 years that I was on the board, anything that came that was water related, the rest of the board looked to me for advice. Because I knew I could at least give them my opinion on it. And I agree with Dave. I think that they need to realize that that's what we're here for. That we're not a voting body, but we have the ability to do the research and give them the information that I think they need to make a clear decision. Now, granted, it was during COVID and all this kind of thing, you know, and that was a big part of it, but in the future, anything that's water related like this, it should come in front of this board so that we can at least give them a comment on it.
Especially since we do have the knowledge of what goes on the water, and they need to look towards for some guidance on that side of it. Stop thinking about the money, stop thinking about the crazy stuff, and be practical. And that's what this board should be, is a voice of reason and practicality as to how it affects our waters.
Thank you, Dave. Bob, you deliver your comments with assertiveness, and I think that is well respected, actually. So you don't have to explain your delivery. We know what to expect.
Oh, that's a compliment or?
It's a compliment, Bob. That's a
No,
compliment.
no, it's not.
Not everybody has.
Thanks, Dave.
Not everybody has that, and so it always takes one in the crowd to have assertiveness. So thank you.
Andy, there's a woman back there.
Ellen, Mayo, no,
Okay.
you're done before you started. All right.
Can't hear it all.
We'll continue this until the next meeting, and the board members know what you need to do. If you want to do that. If not, that's your choice. If there's no more discussion on Vineyard Wind, we'll move ahead to new business, sediment transport study and dredge plan. We have a presentation today with Vince Murphy, the town sustainability director, coordinator,
Manager.
manager. He's got three.
Got a lot of hats.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
Floor
Chair.
is yours, Vince. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, for introduction purposes and for the record, Vince Murphy, I work in the Natural Resources Department. I'm the Sustainability Programs Manager for the town. With me here tonight is Dr. Irene Watts from Baird, the consultants on this project. If I could ask Irene to share screens, because I'm going to do the first 6 slides. And while she's doing that, I'm just going to give you a very quick rundown. We're going to give about a 15-minute presentation and then questions afterwards if the chair accepts that. We've been working on the sediment transport study for about 1.5 years, and that then informs the dredge plan. You do one so you can inform the next. That's the science part of it. Tonight, we're here for the other part, the knowledge, what you guys know. So we've already done one public presentation in the early part of September. We've already presented this to the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. Some people are going to hear this multiple times, and I apologize, but we do need these forums, these public settings, in order to get the message out there and get the feedback not only from members of these boards, committees and commissions, but also the public, which we've already done with a singular public forum. The next thing we're going to do after SHAB is on Thursday night, just so you know. We're going to take this same presentation to the Conservation Commission to get their feedback from a different point of view, looking at some of the legals. And I think next week on, I think Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm not 100% sure, we're taking to the Harbour Plan Update Committee. I understand you've got some representatives on that as well. So you're going to hear it multiple times, but that's the way this is going, because I need as much feedback and as much input as we can get. If all goes well, hopefully we can also have time to take it to the select board at some point in October. So if you can share screens, thank you, Irene. For stage setting, that's our cover slide. We do work with Arcadis, they're the lead consultant on this. Baird and Ty and Bond are sub-consultants on this. And Baird have done much of the sediment transport modelling, and that is exactly what Dr. Irene Watts is going to explain. Ty and Bond have also done a lot of the environmentals on this. Next slide, please, Irene.
Just bear with me just a second. Come on. There we go.
Thank you. So this is just to put everyone in the same place and understand what the goals and objectives are and where we stand right now. So through a data-driven process, this project aims to help guide resilient decision-making with respect to sediment management on Nantucket. Information collected through this project will improve navigation in the harbors for the benefit of the public and help maximize sediment resources. We need sediment resources on Nantucket while avoiding unintended ecological consequences. That's important for the project and me personally. I'm just going to put that out there. Next slide, please, Irene. So the project area, you know it, you love it, and it's what we all want to talk about more than anything. We've got Nantucket Harbour, we've got Pulpus Harbour within Nantucket Harbour, and we've got Madaket Harbour. That's the extent of this area. Those boxes recognize the extent of the work that's been done. There's been a small little piece of work that's been done outside of this, and I'll get to that in a moment. Next slide, please, Irene. So the project tasks to date, we've been through a lot of work on this. A lot of these have overlapped in time, and you can see this in how we've gone from spring 23 to 24, and the next project underneath also overlaps in time as well. But we've already done all of the development and collected up all the data and the information. We've done the bathymetric surveys, we've taken core samples, looked at water levels, we even did eelgrass mapping. We looked then to put all of that into models that Irene will describe a little bit more. And then we worked through them, calibrated them and made sure that they worked with validation. The models were run in 3 different timeframes, and it was effectively an average summer type tide cycle over, I think, several weeks to a month, average winter, same idea, and then an extreme storm event, and Irene can explain it more, but they selected Winter Storm Grayson from 2018 because they took the data from that as an extreme event. So that was modeled as average summer, average winter, and storm. So then we looked at how we would prioritize and plan for dredge projects. The model analysis showed that there was a couple of key areas that it's worth doing some dredging in, and it showed where through the model where it would benefit from dredging and where it might not. And then for the validation and verification and any other things that we don't know that the model can show, we're here to ask for input from watermen, people who know the harbour better than we do. We want to identify prioritizations and planning for nourishment projects after that. So we're going to end up with taking sand out in channels for dredging for navigation. What are we going to do with it? Is it going to go to an on-island sandbank location for if it has to be stored temporarily or for a length of time? Does it have to, and then how are we going to use it for, say, things from the Coastal Resilience Plan for nourishing beaches? How's that going to work? Where is it going to go? How is it going to get permitted through time? And that gets onto the next part where we're going to start looking now this fall at how we're going to run through the permitting for this. Everything from Mass DEP, 401 water quality, just to get all of the right permits in place so we can have a 10-year dredge plan. This isn't just one and done dredging anymore. This is developing a plan that will work over a 10-year period so that if somewhere needs some maintenance dredging, thinking here for the sake of argument, the entrance to Pulpus Harbour, got dredged once, filled in quickly. That means it's the kind of area that would benefit from repeated dredging to maintain the depth so you can get in at low tide. Next slide, please, Irene. So, and then we looked at all of the data collection, just to give you an idea of some of the data that was collected. Next slide, please, Irene. We did eelgrass mapping throughout all the harbours. We came into a piece of good fortune and we saw that we were able to extend the contract in a minor way. And for just a small amount of money, we were able to get all of the eelgrass surveys done for Tuckernook as well. So that was a great, super little beneficial add that we've been able to get good benefits from for other projects. So what they did was they used, so that was the field survey part. And then for verification purposes, they used near maps. It's extremely high resolution imagery that if you like zoom in on a car, you can see the sunroof of the car and the side mirrors coming off it. It's very, it's kind of expensive, but it's very high resolution picture so you can see what it is. And the images were from April 2023. And that's also when the project started in May 23, so it's in the right time frame for this project. There was an awful lot of bathymetric surveys done throughout the harbour, all three harbours, just so we can see what the bottom is like, get all the surveys done, review the previous data, add it up with existing data, and we got it down to a 0.1 foot accuracy. We deployed water level monitors in a number of locations. We had right at Jackson's Point on the pier there, in Madikit. We had one in the head of the harbour, right up at right by Warwinnet, where the trustees' property changes over to an NCF property. We also had one right in Poultice Harbour on the NCF on the Conservation Foundation dock, and one separately out in the water, because that one had to be reset twice. We also had the NOAA data from by Steamboat Wharf. And then they went off and did a lot of core samples as well to go down into the sediments in the harbours, see what it is, where there's a lot of silt, where there's a lot of, if there's any silt or is it all sand. Samples are taken, pulled out, taken off island, analysed just to see what the composition was like, to get an idea of what we might expect in places. All of that then was put into the model, just to understand how that might affect flow, how sand moves, in tidal frames, just as in tide cycles or in storm cycles, to see what happens. So we collected extremely good information for the model. At this point, now that I've given you the background for the model, it is probably the right thing to do to hand it to Irene to talk about model development. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. Is my audio okay? Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
All right. Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to share this with you. The engine that I'm using for this model is called the Coastal Modeling System. It is developed and maintained by the Army Corps of Engineers. It is used throughout New England. I've used it throughout New England and other places in the country. Right now, the New England district is using it on an active project in Newburyport, Massachusetts. So this is a well-used tool for the area. And the components of the model, it includes waves, winds, tides, and sand movement. And ultimately, what we're most interested in is sand movement. So the different data sources that we use to inform the model, we want to take as much information from the world and put it in the model. Number one is our waves. Our National Data Buoy Center gauge is off Nantucket Sound Buoy. That is our offshore boundary. And we also get winds from this buoy. Winds are also provided by NOAA's interior gauge at Nantucket Harbor. Tides are also from that gauge, as well as we have our measured tides that Vince described. And the Army Corps of Engineers tidal database also went into the model. And Vince also mentioned some of the bathymetry sources. We have our measured set that was done in 2023 with merging with other DEM or bathy products that provided by NOAA. So we'd like to share with you some initial model results, and these will be some animations. Let me see if I can't get it up and going here. Come on, video. There she goes. I was being impatient. So I'm going to let this run. The only thing that I'd like to say is that warmer colors are indicating stronger currents. Cooler colors are indicating slower currents. The arrows are dictating or directing where the water is flowing to. So it looks like that might be a little laggy. I apologize.
There we go. Irene, can you explain the time frame of each of the videos, please?
Absolutely. This is about 2 weeks of a 3-month run. I believe this is the spring run. Yes, it says June up in the upper left. So Vince alluded to a little bit of our seasonal approach with the models. We have a 3-month winter run, a 3-month spring summer run, and we used March 2018 for our storm conditions. I think we had 4 nor'easters go through in that particular time frame. So we really, asked a lot out of the model and wanted to really observe how the system responds to that type of forcing. So looking at the currents really gives us an idea of how the system is operating under this particular forcing condition, how the currents are flowing in and out of Pulpus Harbor.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely, please do.
I'm curious as to where the moon is at during these different rotations. Is there any way to, in the future, just, moon plays a huge part on tides, as you're well aware. I just trying to figure out where the moon's at, you know, are we full moon, half
Oh,
moon? Cause
moon
that
phase.
will affect all of that a lot.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can look that up and get back to you and let Vince know. No, I don't have that at my fingertips.
So this is 2 weeks out of 3 months.
Yeah. But it'll, at some point in that time, there's a full
You
moon,
want to
there's
know,
a new.
you want to know for the 2 weeks is what I'm asking.
Well, so I'm looking at the model here, Vince, and you
Yeah.
see like I'm not so much looking at Pulpus Harbor, but I'm looking at to the left where it's,
Yeah.
see right there, it's in a circular motion in the
Yeah.
center of the harbor. And then at one point, it doesn't circle anymore, right there.
Yeah.
It changes. So I'd love to know where the moon's at right there.
Okay,
Are we on a full moon? Are we on a new moon? Are we on the small tides in between the moon? Because that has a lot to do with how this all happens.
no worries. We're trying to find that and have a look at the same
Excellent.
feature, be the full harbor.
Yeah, and just for, so I'm gonna throw this out there in the future, when you put a model like this up, if you could maybe put in the corner where the moon's at, cause that would make a big
Mm.
difference.
Box in the corner.
You know, just, okay, full moon, half moon, new moon, so we can kind of see.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
I will, oh, go ahead.
Dave,
Yeah, I just want to point out too, over on the far left-hand side, if you watch that carefully, you'll see a gyre there. That's very important because that is, as we all know, it's deep there. It's also full of hundreds of years of muck, sediment, silt, and decaying nasty stuff. So it's very important because of the when you dredge. Because of that gyre. I just happened to see it on the model and it just reminded me of that. There's also one in the lower harbor. But anyway.
thanks, Dave.
Well, if we're ready, I can move on to other parts of the model if you like.
Yes, please.
Nope. Come on. We're asking a lot out of PowerPoint tonight, I see. There we go. So looking back at the main observations that we were able to make when we're looking at the model as a whole, the waves are moving sand into the inlet from both the north and south areas, and they're moving towards that channel. And so the tidal currents are redistributing the sand within the inlet back and forth, creating shoals. And those were our two main findings with looking at Pulpus Harbor with that portion of the model. And I'm going to jump over to COTU, and I have another animation. If it will load.
While she's loading that, Mr. Chairman, could I just make another point real quick?
Yes, please, Dave.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody, the entrance to Pulpus Harbor dredged in 1963, 1993, and 2013. The last permitting for the dredging for the entrance into Pulpus Harbor was around 8,000, 9,000 cubic yards. We did it in 93. We took almost 40,000 cubic yards out of there. In 2013, when it was dredged, the important factors are we were able to go around the eelgrass and also permit through the state and the Corps of Engineers the permanent sandbank locations for us to store sand, which is something we never had before. So I know that's part of the discussion earlier about the sandbank. I want everybody to remember that because the thing you need to remember is we have a place to put the stuff so we can use it for further beach nourishment if it can't be used on an adjacent site at a cost benefit. So just a couple points.
Thank you, Dave.
So the main thing that I find most interesting about this particular view is looking at how the currents is moving through Upper Harbor. And how it's interacting with the cuspate features of CO2.
Were you able to determine what the residency time of the water in the Upper Harbor was? How long it takes to exchange from the Lower Harbor to Upper Harbor?
There's actually a previous study that did that. The
I just
Massachusetts
wondered if you
Estuaries
guys have done it.
Project. But no,
Is that-
I didn't really look at the residence time as part of this.
Peter, does that say May of 23, the timestamp in the upper left corner?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Yeah,
can you go, is there any way to go to a certain day? Or,
I think this is about 5 days, but what day were you looking at?
I'm curious on May 7th, 2023.
I think I stopped the animation. These
What
files
day
are
you have?
large, so I can look at May 7th. I
Either
would have
May
to go
7th
back into the model.
Either May 7th or May 23rd, because that was the new moon and the full moon. I'd love to see the velocity in
Okay.
colors.
Yeah. I will
Yeah.
work on that, as long as Vince is cool with that.
Yes.
Okay. It's, the animations are very, very large, so I generally constrain it to a certain amount of time, or else it will be sitting here waiting forever, but I will dig back into the model solutions and look at that for you.
Because those are the two, that's the new moon and the full moon, and those ideally are when we have the biggest tides of the month.
Yeah,
So that would create the most velocity.
that would be good. We can do that. Okay, we have some observations when we looked at the model as a whole. Let me get it to go to the next slide. I've never run something off of SharePoint before. Come on, there she goes. So our Upper Harbor observation, when we stand back and look at the model as a whole, we put everything together, we were able to replicate the unique tidal and wind form features of the cuspates. It's really unique type of shoreline. We wanted to make sure that we captured that correctly. The shoreline is relatively stable with mild erosions. However, it's one of the biggest observations was there's no source of sand feeding the beach from the harbor side. So that was one of our key takeaways when we really looked at everything. I have one more area to look at, and that is Matticat. There she is. So again, this looks like the spring run. I started at the 2nd of May, 2023. The model does replicate wetting and drying, and that's why some of the shoals are kind of getting covered and then exposing as the tide goes in and out.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Dave.
yeah, I'm sorry to be a pain, but
Not
do
at
you,
all.
do you also have a model that shows the water flowing in and out of Hither Creek?
Vince, I might need your assistance on that. Is
So-
Hither Creek this section down here in the bottom?
Yes.
So, yes, Dave, the model does show it, but because the water flow is limited, it's very dark blue and the black arrows don't show up so well on it. What I can do is, if there was information about this, I can send it to you and you can then, look at it, on your own computer screen, change the brightness of your screen, you'll be able to see it a bit better.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. Plus, I know Bobby and I share an interest as to the water flowing in and out of the ditch. So I think that's very important. The ditch is up by Matticat Marine, and it looks like the model runs out there. But anyway, those are just some more points of interest, I think, to everybody.
It's one of those, if you get a bigger view, you kind of lose some of the detail, but the detail is there. We can zoom in and get you a different view.
All right, thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Any other questions while we're on this part? Go ahead, Vince.
I had a question back in Nantucket Harbor. You said there was no source of sand feeding the beach. on the south side of the harbor. But I would, what about the coastal area from Monomoy that goes all the way up? The wall in it that's only broken up by the channel and then a few, there are, some recent, erosion control structures that begin basically at Fargo Way and go down, kind of stop at the Octagon House and then pick up again and go almost to Parkmill Point.
Yeah.
And those guys put sand over those things, so that's a sand source, but then there's the bank, in front of, the field station, and you can go there and after a storm and see that it's receded, and then
Yeah.
there's a bank on the other side of, on the west side of Folgers Marsh, running all the way down a ways, and so there's some sand that's eroding onto there.
So you're right, there's no question in that. But in the vast acreage of the harbour, the volume that's contributed from, say, the erosion control project at Pocomo, the erosion by the, I was gonna say the Life Saving Museum, it's not.
Yeah,
it's
field
the
station.
Field station, thank you. They're relatively small, unless it's contributing big numbers, it's hard to capture that in the model is the problem. So yes, we talked about it at the meeting on January 4th about trying to find ways to capture in the model, and we're still looking at that, so yes.
And then another question is on the north side, the Cascade Spits, you know, it's the winds that are on the northeast winds and the southwest winds are carrying the sand from the bends out to the points and keeping those long, but then it's the tides and the currents that are wearing them away and redistributing the sand, the sediment back along into the bends. So do you have any sort of, and that's how come we don't have, because of that equilibrium, we don't have points that connect with the south side, so you guys have a measurement of that sand?
So Irene can correct me on this by all means, but my understanding of it is there's this model, every model has limitations. And the limitations within this model is that it just does the bathymetric area, the area from kind of like the tide line down. What it doesn't do is catch how sand moves across dunes. We don't have the wind aspect of this to show the sand, how sand moves wind into the system. Am I right in that, Irene?
You are correct. There is some recent research, but it's not ready for prime time. But they are trying to capture aeolian transport, wind-driven transport into these type of models. It's very cutting edge. That is our next step. It's just not here right now.
But I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but I think it'd be a big factor. I mean, go-to is pretty much all sand and gravel and sediments and the only thing stopping that sand is the cedars and the beach rose and poison ivy and everything like that. And when it's whipping out there, and I've been out there, the sand's blowing all over the place, it's blowing right into the water. So that would be, to me, a factor. And plus the sand is coming down from Great Point and being deposited onto Co2 and all the way out and then gets stopped by the East Jetty and is building out. So there's a sand source coming down from up there that probably somehow finds its way into the harbor.
Yeah,
anyway.
So back to the limitations of the model, we didn't have the outside, we don't have the sand side, we only have within the harbors.
Okay.
So we can't capture the outside. It's not within the funding or the time frame of the view shed that we have for this, that we're only focused on the harbors and dredging in the areas and where we can for navigation. So.
It's the door, you just have to shut it so it's
Oh,
closed.
okay. Yeah, so, and the other thing is, as Irene said, it's cutting edge. It's the next step in this type of modeling. But because this contract got going 18 months ago and is due to expire in 6 months' time, we don't have the time or the money or the budget to include that kind of thing in an existing contract. It will be ideal. There's no question. I'd love to see it in there, but we just don't have the ability to include it now. And I don't know when it's ready for prime time either. It could be a couple of years. So we just have to use the best available data, which is what we're doing.
So one more thing, Mr. Chairman. So, you know, we had way back when some wind turbine people here before, a year ago at least, saying that the driving of the pylons into the seafloor
Mhm.
is gonna stir up sediment and silt. It's gonna somehow find its way into and fill up Nantucket Harbor. And then, you know, we had, Jesse Sandoli worrying about pollution that's gonna come from the wind turbines, either internal or whatever is coming from the ships, finding its way into the harbor. You know, this type of modeling would be a good way to show what the currents are coming from out there into our area.
So if we did that type of modeling, if I can, Mr. Chair, this has been a question from the start, about what is the next phase of sediment transport studies. So the question is, can we do the outside of the island? And when we looked at this question and the time and the expense of it, how far offshore you'd have to go. If you just do close to shore within a couple of 100 yards or whatever, you get it's cheaper and faster, but you know, still millions of dollars. And if you want to get more and more out into the open ocean, 300-400 yards, you know, get the money bags out and start multiplying. It's very expensive, and then you have to match that up with something. What Peter's suggesting is matching it up with understanding ocean currents for how potential pollutants might get to Nantucket. The one thing that I was told in college by every professor when we talked about water, and this is just what we were always told, the solution to pollution is dilution. And when you've got an ocean of dilution, we just have to know where currents are running. So it's a bigger ocean current question, but not relevant to harbors. I see where you're going with it, but it would be very, I mean, like unthinkably expensive.
Okay.
And to give and it would give an answer, but what's the answer related to the cost?
Right.
And I have to be considerate of taxpayers' funding. I appreciate the question, but the big question here tonight for this advisory board is, where do you see the need for dredging? Not trying to drag in other multiple outside questions. We do need input, and we do need to understand where you see problems when you're out in the boat. We'd like to know what kind of boats you're using, what kind of draft the boat has, where you have trouble getting places at certain times, and what is the most beneficial place to dredge, and where it needs maintenance dredging.
I'll give you that answer right now.
Please, through the chair, please.
No, mate.
Dave.
Mr. Chairman. All right,
Go ahead.
Peter, I think a better way to do what you're talking about is the coastal zone management shoreline change maps, you know, which go back to the 1700s. And we need to I'll find out when the last time they were updated, because that's basically the end result of sediment transport is the shoreline change. And that's done, you know, obviously around the entire island. So that may be a way to do what you're trying to do, or part of it, Peter. The other question I have is, in your modeling and in preparation for sediment transport and future permitting, were the previous permits reviewed, and the historic disposal sites mapped out and reviewed to be used in the future for future disposal sites? Did you determine where those were, where they are, and where they've been permitted? Because dredging is a wonderful thing. However, if you don't have any place to put the sand, it comes to a screeching halt. So,
agreed. And I have a lot of information, and not through you, Mr. Chair, if I can. The answer is yes, to some extent. About, I want to say about 4 years ago, Dave, I was handed a box of your printouts from a person in town admin, and I just went through it. I scanned a lot of it to send off for this project. I have information dating back to the 70s. I don't have the dredging information that you were talking about from 1963, but I have everything from the mid-70s on.
all right. Well, I think it's important.
Yeah. So I have a huge back catalog of it. It was almost mainly your work, Dave, a couple of other people's work, and then a couple of independent dredging activities that took place, say for what's it called again? The White Elephant, they did one, around around 2020, around 2009. Just a small one around their kind of little berth area. And I got other ones from around the steamship dock as well, but I collected up everything I could find. So basic
All right.
answer is yes, but I only have from a certain time period. It was the bones of 50 years.
Yeah, I just think that the disposal sites are difficult to identify and they're hard to come by and it just, anyway, and
I hear that.
Well, Dave, are you asking about disposal sites that were used by the Army Corps when the channel was dredged,
No.
when they?
no,
No,
I'm
okay,
talking, I'm talking about local projects. For instance, where is the disposal site when we dredged Hither Creek in 1985? I'll use that as an example.
it was Smith's Point,
I
it
was
was
about to say
pumped
that.
onto Smith's Point.
And I have the information and I have the report and I have the
Yeah,
as-built.
it's on the other, it's the disposal site's on the other side of Millie's Bridge, where that washover is.
Okay,
I'm just saying, that's an example of things that, you don't want to have to recreate the wheel, especially when you're going for permitting, because if it's been used as a previous disposal site, the permitting is a heck of a lot easier than it is to develop a new disposal site under a new permit. So anyway, I'm not trying to belabor this. I'm just asking some questions that I know that ideas that have been difficult in the past.
all right, Bob, before I go to you, I guess I'm gonna jump in. Peter brought us back to Nantucket Harbor. There's one, statement that you make that keeps catching my eye. Shoreline is stable, minor erosion. This is inside the harbor. And I'm curious, and I believe I brought this up at another presentation you did.
Yep.
If you're taking older maps and overlaying them over what we have currently to get an idea of how much beach has been lost within our entire harbor, and it's talked specifically Nantucket Harbor, because so much shoreline is missing. Since I always use 1991 as a difference, because when the no-name storm came through, it's almost like Nantucket turned into the surface of the moon. It was changed so dramatically during one storm that the noticeability by eye was intense, to say the least. I'm going to, and using a benchmark like the UMass Field Station being 20 to 25 feet from the edge. Where was it when they built that building? Probably in the 50s to 60s. Were they 75 feet away? So have they lost 50 feet? The same goes for, say, Pockama Bluff. Recently, the Gamble House was moved back. What does that tell us? The entire bluff has eroded. All that sand has eventually, it may for a short time build up the beach, but once we get high tides and those tides are coming right up to the toe of the bank, they're drawing that sand out into the harbor.
So I think again, we're back to a fundamental misunderstanding. You're dead right in everything you're saying. There's no question there. These models only show the movement of sand in the 3-month time frame. We're only talking about 3 months for each model run at maximum. We can't account for historic like that. It is a natural question, but it's not part of this model.
You're saying there's only a small amount of erosion in those 3 months.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, so that explanation, shoreline is stable, minor erosion, is for a 3-month period.
Correct.
Okay. Good to know.
No problem.
We had, and Dave, when we had Steve McKenna in here, we talked about dredging for years.
Yeah.
And we were looking at it, especially in conjunction with the Land and Water Council doing the eelgrass restoration, starting, in the Shimo area, and then their second project, Fifth Bend. And Fifth Bend, from what it sounds like, has struggled. There's a lot of granular sand
So you're saying
from
you
the
want
beach
Fifth Bend
there.
dredged? I'm trying to get answers. You're looking for Fifth Bend dredged?
Well, what I'm looking for is
Yeah.
picking a test site. Where we can get rid of that sand, get back down to the muddy base where eelgrass can survive. But then I imagine it's going to require, studying, how big of an area. To make it worthwhile before it just fills back in from all the sand that's around it. If we go with too small of an area, what I'm getting at is, instead of just focusing on navigation and where fishermen are seeing shallow areas, but to find these dead areas that are smothered with sand, where we know eelgrass is never gonna come back because there's so much sand there. And going for some permitting that gets the sand out of there for the rejuvenation of eelgrass beds, ultimately becoming shellfish beds.
So I very much like this, if I may. I like this idea a lot. I don't want to look for problems. So first of all, I want to investigate this more, see if we can. The way that we've been looking at this up until now is dredging for channels for navigation and then beneficially reusing the sand. So for nourishment on beaches, say like jetties, cliffside, South Shores beaches, wherever it's needed. And that's how you get permits for these kind of things. Where I see an issue with what you're talking about, which is a terrific idea, and I'd love to see if we can make it work, is it's large area dredging. Nobody does that much for anything other than a restoration project, and then they become pilot projects. And we all know the issues with pilot projects. So we're very much, I hate to say it, run of the mill, just doing what every other municipality with coastline in the state does, just dredging for navigation. I want to kick the tires on your idea because I very much like it. Now, what acreage are we talking about? What volume of sand?
Well,
And
but-
again, where do we put that sand is the next big question.
Mr. Chairman. We've been talking about this for a very long time, and we're very happy to hear that the sediment transport and the dredging modeling was going forward. But Mr. Carlson sat at numerous meetings where we discussed what you're talking about dredging for areas that are filling in with sand and the whole scraping the sand, planting the eelgrass in small areas to see if it would work. So I'm kind of surprised that when the scope of this project was developed, that our concerns that we've talked about for 2 or 3 years, actually more than that, 4 or 5 years, wasn't discussed at least as a possibility within this particular contract. So, and maybe that's something that you and Vince can talk about offline to explain to him what we've been talking about for years. Dredging for navigation, very, extremely important. But this other idea that Mr. Lowell has come up with, has been discussed for many, many years. And I'm kind of disappointed that wasn't at least discussed as far as being in the scope of this contract.
Well,
There's a
Vince has
reason.
given us the chance to talk about it now, so I don't want to go backwards on that.
Well, I don't want to go backwards either, but I don't think that it should have been forgotten in the first place.
Can I answer this?
Steve McKenna's office, where isn't all this type of dredging, the permitting have to go across his desk?
Coastal zone management has to sign off for federal consistency. And we made a presentation to Steve, and we had talked about other projects where within the Commonwealth that this had
And
happened.
just for encouragement with Vince, Steve listened to these ideas and he said, no permits of that type have ever crossed his desk, but he liked the idea, just as you're expressing it now. So if we could get together at some point, look at some aerial photos, see where this sand is, and also maybe even get out in a boat and look at it a little more closely.
No problem. Can I just respond to
Yes.
Mr. Franzuto? Because there is a really good response, and I'm sorry, it's a bit of a basic one. It is valid and it is a very good idea, and it is something that we did kick the tires on. But we're looking at an all harbors dredge plan here. So I'd like to walk before we can run. And if we do standard run of the mill, just like the vineyards did, just like every other town does, dredging for navigation, we get our permits. If we want to do experimental things in the same project, complicate it, and then run the risk of not getting our permits for even for navigation, then we fail. And I'd like to have a success. I'd like to have a
No, I
successful project for navigation and then move on to
I cer-
exactly.
I
And I would very much like to do that.
I certainly understand what you're saying, and having fought this battle myself for going on 35 years, I understand completely what you're saying. I just don't want Mr. Lowell's ideas or ideas like that to be lost in the shuffle in the future.
I
You
heard it.
mentioned the vineyard. I saw just a story in the Gazette quite a few years ago now, really, but they had a dredge working the Great Eggertown Pond for quite a few years, and it seemed to me it was more than just for navigation. It was for actually like refreshing. The operator of the dredge said he put his hand underwater elbow deep and couldn't see his hand when he began. After 6 years or 8 years of dredging, he dropped his sledgehammer overboard and could see it on the bottom 12 feet down. So he felt, what he was expressing was he felt the project he'd been working on for so long cleaned up the water quality in the Great Eggertown Pond.
So there's a couple of different ways of looking at that. So you mentioned before how CZM had never seen a project for water quality management. You can work it in a sideways fashion. I wouldn't mind exploring that. So let me kick the tires on it, but I really just want to, walk before we can run, have a successful permit, and then explore. I've heard it loud and clear, explore how we can do habitat restoration. And I'm going to get off topic, and this is off topic. We're already an environmental leader on these kind of things. We're doing a dredge project on a different place on Myakama Pond. And that is strictly a water quality thing to stop the HABs, the hazardous algal blooms. It's off topic, I appreciate that. But we were so successful with this project and pitching it. We got $1 million grant from the state. We're doing the same thing just for our smallest great pond. But we want to do it for the harbour. We want to do it for more locations. But, we're a small office of 11 people and I'm the only person working on this full time. I can't do everything unless somebody manages to give me my magic wand back.
Thanks, Bob.
I have one that's for navigation.
Please.
As well as environmental.
Yes,
It's
please.
twofold. You get one with the other. Hither Creek.
It's outside of the scope. Oh, sorry, Hither Creek isn't. I thought you were going to say medication.
Hither Creek,
Yeah,
and I'll tell you why this
Yeah,
is
no, we've already
important for
gone to the-
navigation.
yeah.
We have one fuel dock in town, we have one fuel dock in Mattocket. If the town fuel dock goes down.
Yeah.
It is so shallow on that south end of Hither,
Yeah.
or the north end of Hither Creek, that Jimmy and I can't get in there to get fuel.
Uh,
That creek, in 1985, Dave's right, 1985, we dredged the channel going into Mattocket Harbor
Yeah.
because it had sedimented up. I can't say it right.
It's okay.
It filled up so much with sand, and the reason it did was because Smith's Point, Esther's Island reattached to Nantucket, and when Esther's Island reattached to Nantucket, it changed the dynamics of the water flow in Mattocket Harbor. You see it in that map right now, the orange and the yellow and and is all
Yeah.
up between Eel Point and Smith's Point now, and it's all just basic blue on that end of the harbor. When that happened, all of the runoff started to settle in Hither Creek. And the northern end of Hither Creek now is so shallow that you can't get into the boatyard, and it causes two problems. One is navigation, which is what you're looking
Exactly.
for. But mainly, it's caused a TMDL issue in the harbor because Hither Creek, Long Pond drains into Hither Creek. And there's no velocity coming out of that pond anymore. And it really needs to be dredged from the entrance to Hither Creek all the way to First Bridge. Because when you do that, you will create a velocity in that pond will flush. And it will clean itself in a matter of, I bet, a couple of years. You will see an immense difference in that pond.
Yeah.
We don't, that is the island's major herring run. The state has spent millions and millions of dollars restoring alewive runs. They haven't spent a penny here. There's money at the state that we can get to dredge those ditches. It's a very simple project. You build a barge the width of the
Yes.
ditch, you put a little mini excavator on it and you drag yourself down the ditch
Yes.
and dig it out. And at the same time, you put one of those corkscrew dredges and you pump all that sand, like you said, Dave, back up onto the other side of Millie's Bridge. And it's a twofold. Now, if God forbid anything happens downtown and that fuel dock goes out, we at least have a place that we can get our boats into fuel, because right now we're screwed if we lose that fuel dock. We have one fuel dock on this island and one that we can't get access to.
Also program.
And
Yeah.
boat ramp.
So
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say, through the chair, of course, that the Matticat Ditch and Long Pond are outside of the study area, but again, one for the list for next. So yes, but for Hither Creek itself, the modeling showed exactly what you're talking about. For getting all the way up to the boatyard and for the F Street boat ramp. Do you have trouble getting in there too?
Can't get in there at all.
F Street, good to know.
I'd be
High water.
high water.
High water only. That whole ditch,
What about
from the
over-
entrance to Hither Creek, all the way to the entrance, basically, they need to dredge right up to the entrance of the ditch going
Okay.
into the creek, into the
Yep.
pond. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, I just want to make a comment about First Bridge. It's, I know it's out of scope, but like Bob said, the herring run, I spent a lot of time as a kid fishing at the bridge. There used to be 2 parking spots on the right when you got to the bridge, where you park 2 trucks or 2 cars. All that sand now is in the ditch or in the mouth of the pond. And that's,
I hate to interrupt on that one. Bobby brought this up at Select Board a couple of years ago, and it led to a project where we ended up doing settlement on the side of the road to stop the material going down. And in a study that we're still doing with Linda Loring, we're watching that sandbar get smaller and go away, so it's naturally
good, at
fixing
least.
itself, yeah. And thank you for that, Bobby.
wouldn't hurt to. dig it
yeah,
out.
but what they really need to do, because, I don't wanna get off topic here, but it's nice what they did with the koi bags.
Yeah.
If they put a Cape Cod berm there with asphalt,
We've been talking about this.
then they rip wrap the other side of it, then we can actually still drive a boat down into the pond, because right now you can't drive a boat into the pond because you got koi bags and sediment fence and everything else.
We ran into a different problem with that. I know we're massively off topic, but Linda Loring owned the water's edge there and they didn't want that anymore. And we did a joint project with them.
There should be some type of eminent domain there.
I think they're on the left side, not the right.
Mr. Chairman, we're contemplating something.
Yeah,
This is all great
yeah.
topics, but we
So-
haven't,
That's my only dredge
we haven't
project.
answered any of Vince's questions.
Other people have said places like the horse shed, anywhere else that people want to see dredged.
I'll make a comment on that. I wouldn't say horseshit itself, but biggest sediment. Erosion deposition. Deposition would be a go-to point of any change. You're talking about a
It's on your
Project.
cover picture.
a project where you're gonna do dredging for restoration of habitat. That would be one. There's a huge amount of sand there that didn't used to be there,
On the north side,
on
on the.
right in the north end.
It's a whole new point.
I mean, that, if you look at picture 1950, there's no, it goes
It's
right
not
to the
there at
jetty
all.
straight. There's
Yeah.
no point there at all.
No, there's 100-foot.
That's
point in
under
Great Point
navigation,
now.
but
There's 100-foot point in Great Point that wasn't there 2 weeks ago. You see that when you went by?
I didn't, it's dark.
Anyone have any, I'm gonna just throw out a couple of ideas, just see what you guys think, because just stuff that I want to understand better from you guys. So if you're gonna go up harbor, in Nantucket Harbor, and you're going around Pocomo Point, and correct me, is it,
That's,
third and fourth point? Or Bass?
that's the point. That's
So there's a lot of cuspate spits coming off of those, and I'm wondering what that does for water flow in the head of the harbour, and if we, for want of a better analogy, trim those up to increase water flow and navigation. Is that of any interest? Or I know there's risks in it too, because they grow back quickly because of the way it
Mr.
goes.
Chairman,
So you could run across Pocomo Point?
There's a lot of
Basically,
scallops there.
yeah, that's another risk.
Dave
I think Dave-
actually has
know about
a
that.
lot of information and has toyed with this before.
Yeah, it
was I can't remember what year it was, but it was in the mid-90s. We had a small project grant where I think we dredged around 10,000 cubic yards off of Pocomo Point and the 2 points on either side. The problem with it is the money was limited. Therefore, the quantity was limited, and it filled back in a relatively short period of time. But the science has been done that those 3 points can be, and if you think back, that was for navigation and water quality to reduce the time that it takes the water from the entrance channel to get up into Wallwin and flush it. So there was a project there. It could and probably should be done again, only larger quantities, 50,000 cubic yards. Pacoma Point, again, perfect disposal site, public access, public restoration, all kinds of good things. And as Jim points out, that would be a candidate for a eelgrass restoration project as part of that. So, yeah, I mean, we may have to have another meeting about this, because this is a lot bigger than just dredging a couple channels, because it's too shallow to get a boat in.
It was 97.
Thank you.
Vince, can we continue this, and continue with you on discussion versus trying to get this all ironed out?
So when is
in
your
one
next
night?
meeting?
Either at our next meeting,
When's your next meeting?
14 days from now, the 15th.
15.
I can work with that. It'll probably be me by myself, because I only have a certain amount of budget for consultancy
I
on
don't
these
think
things.
we need,
No,
I think we all
don't.
understand what's happening.
Yeah,
I think it's
we
just a
saw the
discussion.
presentation.
Yeah, it'll probably be me by
Is it-
myself.
Is the presentation over?
There's one more slide that says questions and answers, so yes.
Pretty much.
Well,
No, show it, because we might start in.
Yeah, Irene, don't take any offense to that, if it's a budget thing that you can't be with us, again at the next meeting. Your excitement towards this is, well appreciated here, we've been waiting for this for a long
Yeah.
time here,
Oh,
Chad.
very refreshing for us.
Find this to
Oh,
be
good.
very.
I'm very
important.
happy.
And also you can expect our patience, knowing that this is a 10-year out.
Yeah.
Plan, so.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could, and if you could assign your board members homework, I'd like lists and ideas of places that need dredging. That's what we need, is the feedback as much as anything. And if you could do a public call for feedback as well, that would be terrific. And then I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vince.
Vince, I would just,
I mean.
Everybody needs to keep in mind, because Dave has been mentioning dumping grounds,
Yeah.
but you're looking into creating a sandbank and places where some of this could be used immediately for coastal resilience, which is the third leg of this.
Yeah.
Which I feel is just wonderful. Every time dredging has been done and it's dumped out, outside the harbor somewhere or something, I felt like, what a waste of good material,
My new favorite phrase is beneficial reuse. We're not gonna dump this, we're gonna bring it on to land if we need to. Dry it for whatever amount of time we need to, then grade it to get out any kind of silts that we don't need, or any kind of debris, like, I don't know, stuff like beer cans or whatever that's floated in there over the years. Take out the anthropomorphics, have good quality beach nourishment sand that we can put on shorelines. That's the idea. If it needs that, it might not. Some places that we dredge will be very good quality and will be very clean, and we can do direct nourishment. But it depends on what.
Beach nourishment and public benefit is always the first choice. And then we sold sand to SBPF as an example. And if it's not suitable for beach nourishment, it can be used as landfill cover at the landfill. So the sand's not going to go to waste. The only sand that ever got dumped offshore was by the Corps, which, I argued with them for years. But when they dredged Nantucket Channel, the last time they did it was a couple of years ago, they did 40,000 cubic yards. But it's easier for them with the hopper dredge just to take it offshore, open the bottom of the hopper dredge and dump it and let the littoral drift, handle it. But yeah, I mean, we've always got a use for the sand.
Agreed.
We're paying to bring sand to the island, for God's sake.
Right. Anything for our next meeting?
Vince,
Bob, you mentioned the box limit discussion. We'll make sure that's on the agenda. If there's nothing else,
I'll second that.
we've got a motion to adjourn from Mr. DeCosta, seconded by Mr. Bossy. Any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Sherlin? Mr. DeCosta?
Aye.
Mr. Bossy?
Aye.
Mr. Brace? Mr. Franzuto?
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Sorry to cut it short. For us, it's kind of not short. Our attention span kind of gets foggy.
The last time.
Right. Right.
Town meetings.
Yeah.
But-
Vince,